Think about how you feel when things are great. You're happy, the curiosity bug. You're digging down into a rabbit hole of just information and your eyes are lit up. You're waking up early. You're jumping onto things. That energy, I was thinking about it. I was like, how can I insert more of that into my life? Even though, and most people think about curiosity through the lens of career. I was thinking about the other half of just personal life. How do you insert that more often?
Welcome to the Spark Ideas Podcast. I'm John Yarian, your guide in this journey to sparking something new in your career or your life. This is a show about starting things, about empowering people to connect with others, and about making a difference in the world through collective action. In each episode, I have the privilege of discussing foundational ideas of life and work with some of the most insightful leaders across a range of industries, from technology to hospitality, from journalism to sports. You'll be inspired by how they bring these ideas to life, to help you apply them in your own work and life, and to spark your own journey. Yao Huang is a community builder, bringing entrepreneurs, investors, and business leaders together to help innovation thrive. She founded the Hatchery, a New York technology ecosystem advancing innovation in artificial intelligence and machine learning. She also created Wonder Women, a network to foster relationships among women of various professions to encourage each other's success. Yao has helped over 350 emerging companies through different phases of growth, and she advises Fortune 100 companies on innovation and diversity programs. Among many other accolades, she was named to TechWeek's list of 100 most influential people in technology. She is also a U.S. State Department delegate for entrepreneurship and initiatives to strategic countries. Yao Huang, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you here, and it's interesting to already be present in a state of being that relates to what we're about to talk about. So we're going to discuss curiosity.
Yeah.
And that's a word everyone thinks they know, which is fine, and they do. But what we want to do is unpack your relationship to it. And from what little I know about you, you occur for me as probably a pretty insatiably curious person.
Yeah.
You'd have to be to do everything that you're up to. And so I'm curious about that. And I'll start with this. Is that curiosity something that's natural to you, or do you find ways of cultivating it in yourself?
I think both. I think being an Aquarius, it's in the genes somehow, or the stars. I've been this way since I was a kid, and there was a old memory of having read about Da Vinci, and I just thought, he didn't go to school to be a lawyer or a doctor. Like, we're kind of built in a society where you go to school to become the profession. It's a very linear pathway. And I think more recently, a lot of people, as they've gotten into their mid-lives or kind of maybe have a lot more opportunities because of their career, have been wiggling themselves out of this path they were put in for the last 20, 30 years to think about what else is there. And so I had thought back then, that's kind of cool that he got to do everything, an artist, and scientist. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be able to do a little of everything and be good at it as well. Not just touch it, but like really live into it. And so I was like, and this is as a teenager, like young teenager. I was like, what's the hardest thing on the list? Probably something related to like science or
I would think
medicine or something, because that has a lot more structure to it. I'm like, let's start there. Everything else would be easier, right? And that's the original genesis of this path. Later, it became just, I guess the word curiosity really drives into it. So I started my whole life down the Asian path of go be a doctor.
Sure.
So I ended up going to pharmacy school. Did all of that, did well there. And it was the beginning of the internet. I was like, wow, this internet thing's really cool. So who just dumps all that years of schooling and board exams and doctor degrees and corporate job and all them, and just go, let's try this thing that just got invented with a bunch of friends in a basement.
Those are the most interesting people I know. I do have a handful of acquaintances who worked very hard to earn a piece of paper that hangs on a wall that they do not use.
Yeah, so I don't use that much, but the schooling was beneficial in that it taught me how to solve problems. And so then the internet came around. So it's really cool. You can build anything. Like as you think of it, you can make it if you know how, right? And the complexity is both engineering and finance and marketing and all of it. And then that transitioned later into finance and through venture and seeing how women and minorities were kind of the underdog in the picture and lacking in resources, wanted to push more there. And then the most recent pivot or exploration has been into the realm of climate as we speak with the smog outside.
Oh, yeah. It's like a half a pack of cigarettes just to get here. Well, let me pause you there because it's such an interesting way you framed it. And before we totally define curiosity, it's probably worth noting what I think gets a lot of people stuck is having this risk-reward calculation and this notion of not wanting to waste time or wanting to make sure they get something out of whatever they pursue. So you put the work in to go to pharmacy school. And then what we just blew past is you just don't really use it that much. You found a way to continue to pursue things, to have curiosity about things, detached from this notion of, oh, I've wasted time, right? Because the way you laid it out was as a progressive or iterative sequence, right? It wasn't like, oh, I did the wrong thing for a while and then I figured it out. I didn't hear that. Tell me a little bit about your relationship to how those things fit together and how to make sense out of it to somebody who's very hung up on the notion of like, well, I could only pursue or dedicate myself to something if I really knew it was going to be worth it or I got what I wanted out of it.
It's a vibe. It's a feeling. If you are excited to get out of bed, my litmus test is how hard is it to get out of bed? So if I have to like drag my feet out of bed, we've run through this option already. We need to make a change because more of this isn't going to be better. It's only going to get worse. And so I pay a lot of attention to how I feel. And I think anything in the past only helps into the future. I didn't waste anything. I didn't waste all those years of education. It allows me to see problems differently. And because it's a degree based on, you're given a bunch of facts, you have to figure everything out. To figure out the diagnosis, the cure. You might even have to design that medicine, depending on which aspect of pharmaceuticals you're in, right? And medicine and healthcare. And it's a lot of rigor into understanding humans and chemistry, and that applied into tech very nicely, just in a different framework. I didn't have an engineering background, but all my business partners did. So I learned how to code right next to them, how to build the internet at a time when it's being invented. So no one knew what they were doing, but I knew how to make money. And so it's about getting business in the end. And as you move into, as I have moved into other fields, it's been around finding joy in the people that are in these arenas, in the project that we're working on, having purpose, that fills me. And hopefully others can find things like that. And the money always works itself out.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't go get a job in any of these things. I built each of these things. So what I learned in the internet industry helped in almost everything thereafter. And they were not easy days, hard days, 18, 20-hour days. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And it's a roller coaster of stories and emotion and just, you never know what's going to happen. And that's what was exciting. You know, it kind of, every time I get bored, I just shift. This last shift was because I got bored.
Well, you said something really important that people hate to hear. You just made a passing reference that the money figures itself out.
It does.
So it does, but in my work and when I'm, presenting or being with people and say something to that effect, that's really tough for people to hear who aren't having that experience, or that's not how they see it. What I would point back to, and I love that you brought up the physical aspect of it, right? Dragging to get out of bed. Like your body will tell you the truth before your brain gets there. Your body will show you. And what's really ironic and tough about that is when we get into like depressive, low energy states, we tend to be less curious, right? Our world shrinks a little bit. And there has to be a process for noticing that and trusting that there's going to be energy and curiosity on the other side. If you can find the will to just get out of the thing that's draining your energy, which sounds like what you did. You just noticed, hey, this just ain't it. This isn't the thing for me. It's not bringing me energy. I wonder what you would say to somebody who's finds themselves in that state of being, who has fear around money or how they're going to succeed, but is really clear, like, yeah, it's tough to get out of bed. What motivated you to make that change, or what advice would you give them as the alarm clock is counting down to tomorrow morning and they really don't want to do what they're about to have to do?
Have you ever heard a voice in your head telling you to ask for a raise, start a business, or switch careers? Maybe you should. This episode is brought to you by the new book, Spark, 24 Concepts to Ignite, Unstick, or Supercharge Your Work Life. Learn more at sparkbook.com.
So all these changes I talk about didn't happen overnight. There's some patience and growth there, and it has a lot to be, it's a lot of internal journeys. So the first time I got bored was with corporate, right? I can finish my work in 3 hours and still be a top performer, and I'm like, what should I do now? So I ended up playing tennis for 6 hours a day because I love tennis. But no one has this much time to play tennis.
For 6 hours a day?
I know. I played the high school team, like first seed all the way, second, third, fourth, until I ran out of energy. My arm broke, right? So I was like, all right, that's it for the day. We played 6 hours. I played 3-4 matches. I'm going back. So I was really fit. I was having a great time because I love tennis. But after a while of this, I was like, I was living kind of a retired life. I could go on vacation everywhere I want. I bought all the things. I was going out partying 7 nights a week. I was playing tennis, and I was like, this is what people want, right? I was so bored because it lacked purpose. So I was like, well, so I ended up reading a bunch of entrepreneurial type business magazines and just read that for a year and talked to different people and explored ideas and just thought about it because it was scary. That was the first fear of, should I leave this cushy pension, security, cash every month? And I did it. I left and started a company with a bunch of friends. And that was the first one. And then after that, it was this ability to spark ideas because I learned how to build things, right? The hard way. I learned the hard way. At a time back then, I know I look young, but it was like 20, 30 years ago. So they didn't teach you this stuff then. There was no entrepreneurial schools or classes. That was a new word. The internet was so new that this was the test. When you walk into Starbucks, what's the conversation buzzing around the coffee shop? The internet words were not coming out of everyone's mouths, right? And this was New York City, so it's a finance town. Now you walk into a Starbucks, it's blockchain, it's ads and media, and now probably AI stealing people's jobs and all these things, right? And so there's a clear shift in our society to kind of eventually over time adopt this. And my last bit of boredom came with I feel like everything's been built, right?
We're at the end of history.
There's nothing to build. Everything's boring. It's just a boring company. So eventually I was like, what else is there? And so the first time was tennis. This time, as I got hard to get out of bed, I started reading books. Okay, so I go to learning as my form of finding things, whether it be talking to experts or watching a few documentaries. Now Netflix has a lot of good things to just spark ideas. I was reading Bill Gates' book on climate, and I read that book. It's like, I'm pretty knowledgeable on this topic. I didn't know so much. And the statistics really blew at me that we had to go to 0, 0. I was like, just get less pollutant, a little bit less. Fewer dusty clouds. No, that's not enough. 0. I was like, how do we get to 0? He explains all these things. I'm like, well, if he has $1 billion and a bunch of other billionaires are at this and we still haven't solved it, we're in trouble. I don't think our governments and our leaders really have this. So it's like, well, if I'm like halfway through my life, another half of life left, I should probably do something more meaningful and at least have a shot at fixing this when the whole thing breaks. Say, at least I tried, right? So then I went down that journey. And then just constant little discoveries. Went to take a class at Stanford. I'm like, all right, let's learn. Education, learn. Talk to experts. And until I formulate what the next plan is. But that took, from beginning to end of where I'm now, 2 years. The first time it took 1 year. And then you brought up this point of the money thing. Not everyone has the skills to go build something. You can go join something and get another job. Find it based on a new set of parameters, but stick to it. Otherwise, you'll be miserable again. So the things I like are being around good people who make good decisions based on logic, and hopefully work that inspires you and has purpose. Those are the key things generally to make you feel good. It has nothing to do with curiosity, though. It's just how do you shift out of a rut or boredom or things like that?
I think it just depends on how you want to define the word, or we could use a different one, but there's a through line here of consideration, constant consideration of what you're doing, and then these breaks of, research or examination, conversation that always has you interested in the subject of like what you're doing or what you could be doing, none of which sounded to me like some sort of bland acceptance of just like, this is just the way it's going to be forever. I didn't hear that. And so to me, like there's curiosity in it. There's probably some other stuff we could put to it. But that's what I would have listeners notice is there's consideration here and probably an appreciation that life is finite, that there's this resource that's not unlimited. And even the context for where you're focusing your time now has something to do with how much time you have left, right? And you want it to matter. And that's where, to me, it's like we really need to think about curiosity as a feature, not a bug. It should be a consistent presence, not a thing that pops up in idle time, when we're kind of in between things. How does that align with how you think? Do you see it differently? And if that's the case, how would you encourage somebody else to rediscover the curiosity they might have lost or that consideration for what they're up to?
I spend a lot of time around people doing interesting things. So I hear their stories, and it's part of conversation. It's part of not sticking to the same group of people and just constantly spending time with people smarter than you, people doing different things. When I tell people I'm an algae farmer fixing the climate, that's a weird thing. That's not a lawyer, an accountant. What is that, right? But my superpower really is just spending time talking to people, inspiring them inspire me, and over that, somehow finding synergies, and then boom, something happens. I found my latest opportunity through just letting my friends know I'm interested in this, and they kept sending me deals. And I was looking through all these companies, and I was looking for something that was meaningful, impactful to the carbon dioxide problem in some way. I don't want a platform or an analytics. That's not fixing the tangible thing. And so it took years, and I found it. And even then, I spent months digging through it to make sure. And it's kind of amazing, right?
I love the way you put that. And for me, curiosity is something that if you spend any time with children, you'll very quickly notice that curiosity is like built in, right? It's an essential part of the psychological development process. What happens is we actually learn our way out of it, or we're habituated to reduce it or ignore it in order to avoid things we fear or stay inside of a context that we think is where we're supposed to be, or whatever, things you had to break out of, right? And you've made a couple of references to the way it could have been, and you had to change that. So to me, it's really not about anybody not being curious. It's really more about asking them, what is it you're afraid of finding out? Well, what is it? What's the fear that prevents you from doing what Yao's just said, which is just having open conversations about what you're interested in, researching and discussing. And in that process, I have to imagine you encountered things that maybe you were somewhat interested in or had some opportunity, but you realized wouldn't work or weren't a fit for you. Right? There had to be some of that somewhere. And you get to climate, and as you just acknowledged, I mean, this is extremely not figured out. Yeah. Right? This is a huge, significant issue that we just state, like Bill Gates hasn't figured it out. And
the scientists have, though.
Sure.
They really have. If you talk to all of them, even Al Gore,
well,
he was
when
ranting.
I say figure out, what I mean is like solved. It's not it's not that we're confused about it. It's the implementation piece. But you're willing to be in that space and be vulnerable, knowing, hey, here's the second half of my life. I'll make as much of an impact as I can.
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at it and say, oh, well, I'm not enough to change it, so I'm not going to go near it.
Yes. And so it turns out the scientists have solved it. It's just that humans could fix it if they wanted to. It's a money thing. And so the thing I learned after this, diluting it down, is it's all about money. It has nothing about the science. If we wanted to, we could stop this. It's just, could the rich people make more money at it? And so it's about figuring out how to make everyone at the table win. But then even more recently, I was think about how you feel when things are great. You're happy, the curiosity bug, you're digging down into a rabbit hole of just information and your eyes are lit up, you're waking up early, you're jumping onto things. That energy, I was thinking about it. And it's like, how can I insert more of that into my life? Even though, and most people think about curiosity through the lens of career. I was thinking about the other half of just personal life. How do you insert that more often? So I was thinking about it. It's like the times I am like that are usually when I'm going on a trip to a place I've never been. I'm doing something I've never done before. I'm invited to an event or retreat that I'm going for the first time, full of new people, lots of unknowns, but interesting, exciting. So I've decided to put one of those kind of activities into my calendar once a month, right? So Necker Island, Burning Man, a little bit of that, a trip to Australia, just mixing it all in.
And if you're listening and what you're thinking is, I can't afford what she just said, you can afford a version of it.
Something. That's just my version.
Right, but get the point. The point is intentionally introducing spontaneity and surprise, right? New experience. Yeah.
And you mentioned fear and curiosity and how to get there, how hard it is. It's choices in the end, choices you make for your life. So oftentimes people don't make that shift because maybe they're bogged down by responsibility. Children, wives, parents, illness, all sorts of things. And you can say, all right, those are my shackles and I can't break free. Or you can start by making small decisions, choices that will allow you some looseness there. And so I can share with you what's happened for me. I can't speak for others. But one thing that allows me to do all the things I just said, those ridiculous things, is because I have freedom of time and location. The entire 24-hour clock is mine to schedule. And where I am in the world is by my choice all the time. And what led me there was originally, I would say about 10 years ago, I had this thought. I'm like, what? I was the one who went to work every day at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd stay till 1 a.m., went back home, slept, woke up for years. Work was my life, and went to an office because it was easier to take 10 meetings in a row. I made everyone come to me and just fully optimize my workday to hit goals, right? And I realized at this rate, the whole American dream is to go retire at 65, maybe 70 now. And then you get to go on all the trips. I'm like, I don't want to do that, but then my knees won't work and probably need a bad hip. And in your back, you could be like
I'll be hunched over. Yeah.
Can't reach the top shelf. Yeah. So like, I'm going to change that. First things, I need to get away from this desk. So I was like, well, all our engineers were in Asia anyway. So why do I have to go to an office? And this is easier later in life. And I think some of the young 20-year-olds understand some of this now. And there's some changes from the pandemic that allows people to work from home. But I got myself out of the office. That was step one. And then as long as I have internet, I can work from anywhere. So that was step two.
Well, and we'll keep counting the steps. The one thing that comes up for me is I would actually introduce a step one before step one. So to me, the step one is occurring for yourself as having the power to do something about the situation.
Yeah.
You're in the office. You're in your quote unquote old life. But what's happening inside of you is the realization, I can and will act to make it different.
Yes.
And then it gets different. And if you're listening to this and that office stuff is kind of resonating, or whatever the version is for you, it's about changing the way you occur for yourself for where you have authority in your life. And then the rest is kind of details. It's like, maybe it's Asia, maybe it's just work from home, maybe it's something else, but it's having that motivating power to say, okay, my life is happening. I'm not going to wait till I'm 65 to experience freedom. I'm going to start now.
Yeah.
And then once you gather momentum, and what I sense from your experience is at that point, it's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah.
Like it just starts going.
It's hard to stop.
Oh yeah, it's unthinkable of going backwards.
I've gone around the world twice.
Sure.
Just once in the wrong direction, right? You're not supposed to go against time. But, and just going where I want to go. No plans, kind of, it's easier now with all the tools and platforms to book things and do anything on the phone. One time I was at the airport and then decided where I wanted to go. And that freedom makes my shoulders come down, stress goes away. And then the freedom of the clock, I can work any time zone. I just schedule the meetings. Also now later in life, I have a lot more relationships. I don't need to meet face-to-face all the time. And when I first started this, people just had no clue what I was doing. But now I think post-pandemic, people are living in Costa Rica. It's a big boom there. New Yorkers have moved down to Miami and taken over. And you can just kind of work from anywhere nowadays.
Well, you're getting to what we're actually curious about, I think. So we're all here and conscious, which is both a gift and a curse. I am aware of myself. And so what I wrestle with, and everybody else does too, is what does it mean to be alive and what does it mean to be me and to be here with you? Knowing that your inner experience of yourself is unknowable to me and mine is unknowable to you, but there's something in between us that has us understand what it means to be alive. And so you take a trip to some far-flung location ostensibly because you're curious about Madagascar, but what's actually happening is you're finding out who you would be if you were in Madagascar, right? The changes in you and your experience of the world and yourself. That's the point of it. It's not to like randomly wander the globe to collect postcards. It's about to discover new facets of self and ways of growing, because I would suspect that you are in fact different for having been around the world twice. Like you see the world and yourself differently. It's not really about like miles traveled per se, but giving yourself room to grow and evolve throughout life instead of this one kind of frantic burst in your late teens and 20s. And then the rest of it is about tennis and partying. Do you see that differently or the same way?
I, right now, am trying to feel what it's like to live in new places. So I don't go for short periods of time. I like to go for a month, maybe more, until I feel like, okay, this is not for me. And let's try something else. And when I say live there, I mean get an apartment, have a regular restaurant I like to go to, maybe a bar, the bartender, and make some friends, date some people, just kind of live there.
To feel the fabric of the place.
Yeah. So I sometimes travel for fun with some friends, but more often than not, I want to be somewhere for a long period of time. Join a tennis club, and I like that. It makes things interesting every day while I do my day job during the day. Right. So I think you can have a lot of ands and they don't have to be ors.
Oh, sure. And it's a great time to remind listeners who are hearing what you're describing, and it sounds very far off and very unattainable to them. Guys, we just started the conversation talking about pharmacy school. We just covered the part where we were in a 9 to 9, whatever it was, schedule. That was less than 15 minutes ago. This is a story of what's possible if you choose it for yourself. So let's not, pull the ripcord and say, well, Yao's just different and seems to be super rich. It's like, no. There was something else that happened before that, which was like conscious decision-making, because this could be a podcast with a pharmacist who are awesome and God bless them. And that's great.
Fucking boring.
But you just remember that part as you hear her talking about living in different places you've never heard of for a month at a time, because that's how you get there.
Little choices, right? Yeah. All these things didn't happen overnight. So don't just, tomorrow I'm going to go do all these 12 things. No, these took years to get here, and little choices. I didn't know this is what I wanted. I just kept on moving towards anything that made me happier. So if I don't feel good, we got to make a change. And that change could take 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, right, to get there. And then you look back, you're like, wow, look where I'm at now, right? I wanted this 2 years ago, and now I am here. And it's a series of choices. The hardest thing is picking a direction and moving towards that goal. And however long it takes to get there, eventually when you arrive, you may want to go somewhere else again.
Well, you're speaking now from this well-earned habit and practice of making a lot of choices. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'll be there for 6 weeks. I'm going to do this.
Not even just destination, but just even career choices or people I want to spend time with.
Right. But what I want to point at is like the more you get in the habit of doing that, the easier it gets to do and the less precious you are about any one choice. Because you start to see that like, oh, I've got a million choices I'm going to make. This is just the next one. For folks struggling with that paralysis, and feeling stuck, I think they get really overwhelmed by those first few choices that looking back, you realize, well, those are just the first few choices. And I've made a zillion since then.
The first choice took me a year to make. Right. So this none of this is fast. I was scared too, right? So it took a year, right? And some people will go faster, some people will slower, and it helps to have other people to talk to.
Helps a lot.
Yeah.
Helps a lot. So let's kind of work on sharing how we hold or use the word curiosity. And we know there's a definition of it. You can look it up and that's fine. But I have my own relationship to it. And so for me, when I think about curiosity at this point in my life, it's something that I was born with and had in unlimited qualities as a child that I now have to be conscious and intentional about as an adult. I have to create space for it and cultivate it because my brain is different and the demands on my life are different. And so I have to make choices to protect that curiosity. And like you said, listen to my body and what's happening for me. That lets me know when I'm in deficit, right? When my curiosity is starting to evaporate. I don't have to figure out what curiosity is. I have a lot of it. What I have to do is be mindful about the conditions that keep me being a curious person. That's where it is for me. How would you break down curiosity for you?
I mean, I love learning. That spark of not knowing something and then learning a whole bunch of it. Originality, original people, original places, original projects. That's what it was. I mean, keep in mind, like I also started as a poor immigrant that arrived in this country, right? And I just think maybe it's part of the upbringing. I had a long leash. I was always forget to ride my bike home for dinner, and I remember this one memory because I wanted to get to a good school, right? But my parents are immigrants; they don't know anything about how to get to school and nothing.
Right.
So I was like, well, in the summer, I think I should probably get into some programs. So I applied to a bunch of university programs while I was in middle school, and then they let me get on a train to Newark. Right? Which is the murder capital of the country at the time, to go take classes during the day all summer. They're like, sure, just get on the train and then walk 20 minutes to school while the sun is going down.
Sure. Just see what happens.
So a lot of that constantly allowed me to see, what else, what do I want to do? What do I want to try? And then what do I want to be when I grow up? And then what else can I do? I'm not bound by anything. And I think we're very fortunate in this country to be able to do things like that. I don't think this is true everywhere. And so if you have a thought, I think you can run with it. And then the framework of how you sustain it through making money or letting it run for a long period of time is really just figuring out some of the other details. And I think each case has its own set of circumstances. Yeah,
and it's details. And for anybody listening, you probably grew up different, but you can do the spirit of what we're talking about anytime.
Yeah.
You can do it anytime. I'm not telling you to get on a train to Newark. I mean, do that if that's what blows your hair back. But the point we're making, that experience of self as having freedom and being worth the effort, right? To seek out what makes you happy, that can start anytime. That can be right now. Yao Huang, it's been such a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Brought to you by the new book, Spark, 24 Concepts to Supercharge Your Work Life. Learn more at sparkbook.com.